What's up, guys? We should be starting up now. Hello and welcome to another day in the MLB, another MLB Live Before Lock show for you to follow up on a day chock full of sports. And you know what? We got a lot to hit on as always, but we'll get through it as you know we are going to do for you because we're your pals on YouTube and that's what matters. I'm Chris Spags, joined once again by a man who's going to help make this slate make a lot more sense for all of you. You can also find all of his tools and data at Awesemo.com, the name that he shares with this YouTube channel, and of course his high school emo band. That's a fun fact. We haven't busted out in a while. But his name's Alex Baker. You know him as Awesemo. How you doing, Alex?
Doing good, man. It's been a weird day, like outside the sports world with that hurricane, and also some rough events in the rest of the world. So I'm looking forward to tonight's DFS slate because DFS is like comfort food, where if you're having a bad time, like just making a few lineups will help bring everything back to normal. And we got a nice MLB slate here to get back in the groove here.
We got a nice deep fried slate of actual quality pitching today to talk about, like that comfort food Alex is talking about. But one other place that you can find some solace today is by using the promo code NHL is back at Awesemo.com/join. I've warned you guys that the restart code is going to end, but there is still some good news for you. If you want to play some NHL with our boy Jake Hari, who's doing strategy shows every day. And also we have a ton of data, the same data you've come to know and love across all the other sports. That's right there for you for the NHL as well. So take advantage of it. Play some NBA, play some NHL, play some MLB. But use the promo code NHL is back at Awesemo.com/join. Get half off your first month of an Awesemo Plus NHL monthly package. And this is really one that I think we can swear by. Obviously, all the data is about as strong as can be. The NHL, helmed by Jake Hari. Awesemo also providing all the data that he knows and can point to. It's important. And Alex, before we came on the air, you were talking about the crossover with NHL and MLB. So give the people your quick 10-second elevator pitch about why they should be playing some NHL too.
Well, I think both sports are really like kind of similar as far as lineup construction. So it is the easy transition from MLB to NHL, where stacking your teams is essential, and it's just all about hitting the right stacks. And I feel like MLB is the same. You also have the goalie, which is kind of like the pitcher. All in all, just a lot of fun. So I think that it's really nice having that at the same time as MLB, because usually we don't get both at once.
Yeah, the more sports, the merrier is always our philosophy here. And Alex has talked about many times playing as many slates as you can if you have good data and you understand what you're doing. And that is something you can take on yourself by using that promo code NHL is back at Awesemo.com/join. And of course, it would not be a Live Before Lock show if we didn't give our thanks up top to SuperDraft, of course, the future of DFS and a partner of ours. They sponsor all the shows here you find on this here YouTube channel. And you should go check them out at SuperDraft.io to step into the future of daily fantasy sports and their exclusive game mode multiplier, where you say goodbye to salary restrictions and hello to pure lineup freedom. Use your fantasy sports knowledge to draft any player you want to build your very own dream team. And for a sport like MLB, you get a lot more flexibility on there than some of the other salary-based sites. So go to superdraft.io and use the promo code Awesemo10. That's AWESEMO10. Get $10 free on your first deposit of $10 or more, and $20 free if you deposit more than $100. So take advantage of those deals. Help build your bankroll by playing on SuperDraft. Again, superdraft.io, or download SuperDraft in the App Store. And on SuperDraft, there are no limits, more winning. All right, Alex, let's talk about some of the pitching up top here because it is an interesting slate tonight. Some chalk plays here, in particular, 3 guys who jump out. And we should go perhaps player by player here and maybe poke some holes in some guys or see if you feel a little more concrete about them. And one guy I want to hit up on up top is Brandon Woodruff. The strikeout rate for him has climbed exponentially to start the year. He also did have some moments of brilliance last year. I mean, I think if you look at his numbers, really hard to poke holes in what he did, a 30% K rate last season. This year, he's up to 38%. Seems a little bit unsustainable, but the results have been there for him. Going against the White Sox team with 6 players in their lineup who strike out above league average. So, Alex, are you with the Brandon Woodruff chalk, or is he somebody that you trust today at a fairly reasonable price point industry-wide?
Yeah, I think that he's a solid play, as you mentioned, a great strikeout pitcher. The Brewers don't tend to let their starters go to quite as deep as some other teams, so that's a knock against them. The White Sox, they're a good team, but as you mentioned, there's some strikeouts in there, so definitely not a team I'm afraid of picking a pitcher against. So I don't have it as a great matchup, but he's a talented enough pitcher, and the price isn't top dollar, so I'm willing to take some shots. How are you feeling about Woodruff?
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you on Woodruff. I think the issue for me is just him being so chalky and definitely seeming like, I mean, he's good. I don't know that he's quite as good as he's been so far this year. Of 0.6 whip, giving up under a 2x FIP, and that 38% K rate. We're basically talking the Garrett Cole numbers that got him paid untold hundreds of millions of dollars for Woodruff so far this year. But going back to last year, I think there is some hope in this White Sox team. I think they're a team, I guess, we usually talk about stacks and split this up a little bit. I think they're a team where I want some exposure going against Woodruff because of the power they have. But also I think, that's kind of the tax that you're paying for having Woodruff with the field. And I'll be with the field today. And I guess, Alex, real quick here, do you see value in stacking the White Sox heavily? Because that's the first question people are going to ask when we talk about a chalk pitcher who maybe is overperforming.
So I think that the White Sox are a decent option because Miller Park does have a lot of home runs and they have that home run power. But the weather there is not that exciting today. Across the whole country, we're seeing pretty low temperatures. So, of course, that makes the air density higher. In Milwaukee right now, it's only 68 degrees. So for August, that is kind of an outlier low temperature. So as far as the park factor, not quite as good as we'd be used to. So that's just another reason why maybe you'd be into Woodruff.
That and the fact that they're obviously going to be distracted by the sausage races. I think, do they not do those now because of coronavirus? I've not seen a Brewers game yet at home.
I have no idea what you're talking about.
Is that not part of our data?
I'm just going to smile at that. I mean, I track everything pretty closely. Bobblehead night, revenge narratives, but I don't know about this hot dog thing, man. I got to dive more into the weeds here.
The sausage races are a very important part of Miller Park. They have hot dogs compete against bratwurst, all with adorable faces. So I would say that that's what matters to me. But let's keep going through some of the pitching here. And again, we might jump around a little more with stacks and pitchers because there are a lot of very chalky pitchers up top worth hitting on. Here's another guy who's been popular. Weirdly enough, the last time I did an MLB show, I was talking about Andrew Heaney going against the Mariners. And here we are again with Andrew Heaney versus the Mariners in my own personal version of Bill Murray's Groundhog Day. But Heaney does look good again. Price has not come up. He didn't have an outlier performance that last time against Seattle. Kind of just got through, took a few dings in that process, but on the year, still a 34% K rate. Going back to last year, just under 30% for him strikeouts. Does give up some power to both sides of the plate, so there's risk there. But the Seattle lineup, which has been confirmed, not the most power intensive here. You got Seager, you got Nola, who do have some pop against lefties. Guess Shed Long a little bit against lefties, but Heaney, Alex, how are you feeling about him? And I guess how would you grade him relative to Brandon Woodruff?
I like Heaney a decent amount. I think the safest thing on these shows is just recommend everyone. So that's been my strategy. But I think that, man, it was so tilting when they took him out early the other game that he pitched that you can't feel great about how deep he's going. But Seattle is a rebuilding team, so they are advantageous matchups. So that makes it worth it at that 8K price tag.
And do you have a lean between him and Woodruff, or is it mostly because the projections seem to be about as close as can get? But I just feel like for the sake of all the people out there, while they're starting to build their lineups, hopefully around pitching, does either guy jump out more than the other, or is it pretty much you'll take both wherever you can get them?
I think it's not going to be like a key decision point for me tonight. I'll probably just mix these pitchers and kind of have it spread out a little bit because I do like both of these guys and some others. The main thing here is DraftKings and FanDuel and SuperDraft, they all have seen a couple starts, so they know what the pitch counts are going to be. The price tags are a lot more accurate to what we should expect. And therefore, I'm going to be looking more at the bats to really get an edge tonight.
Okay, so we have one more pitcher who's part of this, I guess, holy trinity of chalk pitching today. And he's a guy who was starting the year as a long reliever, did get bumped up to a starting role. Jesus Luzardo for Oakland, going against a Texas team that's been pretty hapless both at home and on the road so far. And Luzardo's strikeout stuff has been good. He was also just shy of 70 pitches in his last start. So one would hope he can make a climb there. But I guess that does come with some risk. We don't really know, I guess, much like Heaney, we don't know if he's going to get that full chance to get, 5+ innings out there. Luzardo's looked pretty good so far this year, going back to last year as a 31% K rate in a limited sample size. This year at about 25%, but not giving up a lot of hard contact. Pretty good swing strike rate for him, getting guys to chase well to 35% clip. So Luzardo, Alex, is he a guy who is on the same tier for you as Woodruff and Heaney, or is Luzardo a grade below? Because I would think the smaller sample size, a little more risk of him getting blown up, even though Texas, again, really not looking great to start the year.
Yeah, the nice thing about these guys who don't have a lot of major experience is usually they have a lot of minors stats to go off of too. So I saw in the majors last year as a reliever, Luzardo struck out like an insane 33% or something like that. But in Double A and Triple A, he was more in the mid to high 20s. So that's kind of translating to me to like a 25% rate in the MLB, which is really solid given his price tag. And let's see, he's 7,600. Texas, as you mentioned, really struggling. So that's the reason for optimism. So Luzardo is kind of like that trendy pick today, but his downside is the same as Woodruff and Heaney, where you just can't really expect him to pitch more than 80 pitches tonight.
If you had to choose one of these three guys to be under the field on, and obviously not saying you're going to necessarily do that with your lineups as you run through your crunches, and of course, guys, hit that like button for Alex. This is, I think, your third show of the day or fourth, so you're making a lot of sacrifices for the folks out there, and quite frankly, your lineups can't be good if they don't hit the like button, so actually that might make them not hit the like button.
Yeah, this one might have a record number of thumbs down.
But hit that like button. It helps us out a bunch here to stay on track and helps us get seen by more people. And again, really, for a guy like Alex who's been grinding all day today while making lineups and doing shows, it does help us feel a little peppier to keep going. So please give us a little love there. But Alex, if you had a lean here between these three guys to come under the field on with all of them, let's say between 30 and 40% by the time the final ownership comes through, do you have a lean on which of these guys you'd be under? Or is it really just, again, I don't mean to keep saying you'll take what you can get, but obviously the optimizer is going to do a lot of the heavy lifting.
I guess maybe Heaney would be the one that I feel a little bit better about fading because they did take him out of the game so early. And if that happens, it pretty much kills the upside of a pitcher. So that's definitely something that was a red flag. But I still think he's a good play. I'm looking at some other guys too that I'm definitely going to have a lot of exposure to. So these aren't necessarily my top options. Kyle Hendricks in Chicago, the conditions are really good for him. We have Lance Lynn on the other side of that game. He's been a really good pitcher this past year and a half. And then we have Kristen Javier for Houston. I'm hoping he can do what we hope Josh James would do a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, these Houston arms always look tantalizing in their small sample sizes, and then sometimes some warts do reveal themselves. But Javier is a pitcher at 6,500 on DraftKings, who is looking pretty good with what he's done so far. 38% K rate so far this year. Not pitching too deep into games, but the hope is that he can definitely pay off that salary. But we'll find out. Let's talk about a little more depth here for some of your guys, Alex. You mentioned Hendricks as being one who jumped out to you with the conditions favoring him. What looks good to you about Hendricks? And I guess relative to his ownership, he's really not too much less owned than some of these other guys. But the projection that you have for him actually is pretty strong here. So what's new with Hendricks? Hendricks, I don't get. I didn't play him much last year, but this year it does seem like he's been mostly lights out. And the projection you have for him is pretty aggressive.
Yeah, I mean, he's not really a big strikeout guy, so it's not really the strikeouts that is fueling this projection. It's the fact that he goes deep in games. The conditions in Wrigley Field today are very favorable for pitching. That's probably the main factor because the Kansas City Royals are projected to put up the least number of runs as far as teams tonight. So that's a really encouraging fact for Hendricks, who's kind of above average pitcher, and I'm projecting him to pick up a good amount of points as far as innings pitched and just outs compared to the other guys where there's a little bit more run production to balance that out.
Yeah, Hendricks pitching just under 6 innings per start, going back to the last, I think the beginning of last season is what my stat line is now. So definitely can get in there deep. And as Alex mentioned, a 3.1 point implied run total for Kansas City. And their early hitting heat perhaps slowing down a little bit for him. And the conditions, cold day or relatively cold day in Chicago compared to some of the weather out there. So perhaps that gives Hendricks a bit of a boost. Let's keep going to the slate. And I'm actually going to ask you about a guy who I think we don't have him projected for much ownership, and it is about as risky of a spot as you can get. And I know, Alex, you said before that going to a pitcher against a highly owned hitting stack tends to not have as much value. But Kevin Gausman does have some strikeout stuff. There are strikeouts in Colorado's lineup. They are the chalk play of the day. Colorado's been hitting about as hot as you can guess so far, about doubling up the run total in the rest of the league so far on this bridge starts of the season. And Colorado, of course, historically, if you're new to MLB DFS, the Park Coors Field is going to be one of the more beneficial ones, especially during summertime. But Gausman, we've seen him have strikeout upside before. The numbers don't look terrible this year, at least in terms of xFIP and strikeout rate. So is Gausman somebody you could see having any tournament exposure to, Alex, just in the hopes that you can then get away from this Colorado stack and then get a guy who's super cheap and has shown the ability to rack up some Ks before?
I mean, he's the cheapest pitcher that I see. So I think that, I don't hate just punting the position entirely, but he does look like a bad play because, he's in Coors, which mitigates strikeouts. And yeah, I don't think I'm going to end up on him because I think Christian Javier for Houston just has so much of a better overall value that if I'm going value, unless I was going to punt both pitchers, I'd probably go with him.
Okay. Yeah, no, that makes sense. And Javier, as Alex mentioned, not too much more expensive than Gausman, certainly with much less risk in terms of the run total against him. Javier just 4.6 against him compared to just under 7 implied runs going against Kevin Gausman. Let's keep going through the rest of the slate because this is a pretty big slate in terms of pitching here and a couple guys we haven't hit on. One of whom, Alex, I think may have some tournament appeal, and he does seem to be one of your highest projected pitchers in terms of overall points, though not the highest, and I guess we could talk about that guy in a second. Patrick Corbin, we know he has some nasty stuff. He's going against a Mets team who also has some dangerous power, and Corbin has struggled with some of the power to righties in particular, giving up a 170 ISO to the right side of the plate over the last season plus. And these Mets hitters, they do have some guys here who've shown that pop. Pete Alonso's still not quite rounding into form this year, but going back to last season has a 333 ISO against lefties, and always a guy who can break up a good lefty pitching game. This Mets stack going to be owned a little, but Corbin looks like he's under 10%. I don't think that's changed in the last ownership update if I've got that in right. So Corbin for you, Alex, is he great for you, or is he a guy where there's cheaper guys out there who can maybe do what he does?
Yeah, I think, I don't have really a strong feeling about Corbin one way or the other. He looks like a fine play, but the Mets don't strike out quite as much as some other teams, so that's a negative factor. And I think that, sorry, I'm trying to swap out all my Jimmy Butler right now. Kelly Olynyk starting in case you put some NBA and SuperDraft today. Make sure to swap. They have delayed swap, so I think that it's just not a great slate for Corbin because there are a lot of good pitching options that are cheaper. So I think Hendricks would be my number one pick. And then Lance Lynn, if I was going to spend up, he'd be my spend up. While the guys we mentioned previously would be kind of the ones that are a balanced build where they don't cost a lot but project pretty well.
And Lance Lynn is the mystery pitcher I was alluding to here. We should have waited to whore out for some likes before giving away Lance Lynn. But Lance Lynn projected for over 20 fantasy points according to Awesemo today. Good price tag on him, and certainly another guy who's looked good this year. Did show some pretty quality signs of life last year too, so it's not like he's a flash in the pan. Going against Oakland, though, I guess here's an overarching question. Maybe we can sort of tie into the stacks we'll talk about in a second. But out of all of these pitchers who project well for you, Alex, do any of them jump out as being worth stacking against? Because Lance Lynn going against Oakland, I'm not singling him out as my pick necessarily, but Oakland does have a ton of power going the other way, and a good amount of strikeouts too. But certainly a team that can blow up a day fast. So I guess your thoughts overall about stacking against Lance Lynn, and then also maybe first why Lance Lynn is actually a good play.
Well, I think Oakland is a pretty good team, but they're West Coast, so that's decent conditions for pitching. Let's see what the temperature is projected to be 59, so just a really cold day in Oakland. So that's pretty encouraging. It's definitely not the matchup because they're a better than average team. But because of the poor pitching conditions, I don't think I'm going to end up stacking Oakland either, just because there are some really good spots tonight for bats.
Okay. And we'll close out the rest of the pitching here. And of course, if you guys have any questions, feel free to drop them either in the premium Slack or in the YouTube chat, because I'm checking both and bouncing around between everything. Let's see, any other pitchers I feel like are particularly important. I guess, Giolito's a guy we should probably hit on just because Milwaukee's been so bad to start the year too. Another team, and one of many MLB teams starting the year slow. And Giolito's also been starting pretty slow, which I feel like is always what he does every year. He does tend to ramp up as we go. But Milwaukee's so bad. Giolito's at kind of an awkward price tag. Still going to be about 15% owned. So there's not a lot of value maybe in the field there and going his way. But Giolito, is he a guy that you'd want to target at this point, Alex, going against a Milwaukee team who so far has looked kind of overmatched?
I think that he's a decent play because of the weather conditions, like we were talking about for Woodruff. I mean, Milwaukee's super cold today, so for this time of year. So I think Giolito stands out as a good play in that respect. But the Brewers are a pretty solid lineup, so I don't see a ton of advantage in taking him. It just looks like a good player to have some exposure to.
Okay. Yeah, that seems fair. And it does seem, like we've kind of landed on the grouping of guys in the AKs. And then if you want to throw in Kyle Hendricks too, who again, Alex really did co-sign on, those seem like a core group here. But if you want to get different, it does seem like Giolito will at least be lower owned. Same thing for Max Fried, Alex. He's low owned. He really doesn't give up much damage. And I guess for him, the appeal to me would be if you go to Max Fried, you're assuming that all the other pitchers in that price point blow up. So I would think I would go to Max Fried if I were stacking against Woodruff or stacking against maybe Woodruff and, one of these other guys we've hit on that range, maybe Heaney too. But do you see any value in Max Fried, a guy whose strikeout stuff has been pretty good, but mostly his main skill set is just not getting blown up?
He's I like the matchup because Toronto has a lot of strikeouts in their lineup. Pretty much everyone is over 20%, and that is really encouraging sign for Fried because he's a pretty good strikeout pitcher, and that just kind of elevates him that extra nudge that you would need. And let's see, he's the downside with Fried is the weather in Atlanta is a little bit worse than some of these other parks tonight.
Yeah, Fried, certainly not a player who gives up a ton of production in terms of power shots. He's mostly been a guy who keeps that ground ball rate pretty solid for him. Where's his numbers? Yeah, he's on the year. Actually, on the year, it's even lower. But going back to last year, a 22.4% fly ball rate really does a good job keeping the ball down. So Fried, I think, would be a guy I would consider. If you do have a lot, like me, a lot of Woodruff, a lot of Heaney, and a lot of the Oakland pitcher, I think that there is some room here to maybe get a little bit of him in your lineups here, just of Fried, just to try to get a little bit different in that price point, because it's very easy to fall to the chalk plays of Luzardo and Heaney and Woodruff. And I think that could be a point where Max Fried has some options. Anybody else you're getting meaningfully at pitcher here, Alex? We have some guys we haven't touched on at all. Herman Marquez in Colorado, maybe not the spot for him, though. He's going against San Francisco, so maybe there's some opportunity there. Dinelson Lamet, a little too high priced for me going against the Dodgers, but I could see him being a contrarian option. Any of these guys rating for you besides the ones we've hit on?
I think we got the good ones, so let me just make sure. One that you just mentioned, I think he's a good pitcher for sure. So the conditions in San Diego aren't quite as advantageous as Oakland and some other spots, but he's a good talent. The problem is the Dodgers matchup does take away a lot of that advantage too.
All right, guys, hit that like button because we're going to do home run picks in a second here. And of course, the home run game is only as good as the amount of likes we get. That's just the way the home runs work. And we will actually, let me see if there's anybody else pitching. One last guy at pitcher I feel like I just want to touch on fast. Madison Bumgarner. I'm going against him pretty heavy, but I feel like that makes me want to wonder if perhaps that's the wrong move. Houston, to me, just seems due for some positive regression against left-handed pitching. And we could talk about them in the stacks, I think, to me. Well, their ownership's come up a little bit, so I feel like they're probably appropriately owned, but I'm intrigued going against Bumgarner. He's getting hit pretty hard to start the year. It seems like he's been actually getting better results than he should, despite giving up about 55% hard contact, a 16% barrel ball rate for him. But do you see any value in Bumgarner? Or am I wrong for stacking Houston as much as I am is the main question?
I think Bumgarner is definitely not one of the better pitchers on this slate, so I have to agree with you that I prefer stacking against them for sure. Like the strikeouts seem to be on the decline, and Houston is one of the best teams in baseball, so it's hard to recommend Bumgarner.
All right, so there we go. So hit that like button, guys, because that means that I'm not completely wrong for stacking Houston today, and that's a good sign for me today after Bogdan Bogdanovic ruined my morning and really my happiness for the day overall. Home run picks, we're going to do a little early today. Why not? Because I want to talk about some of the stacks, and it doesn't make sense to jump into it now. And, Alex, we talked about it. I think you and I are both on the schneid to start the year, though our home run sheet admittedly has not been, I've not been taking the best care, and nobody else has been helping. So it's just a disaster, but that's life sometimes. I do not feel the need to go first, Alex, so I'll let you go first.
Whew, this is tough. Terry was giving me a tip about one of the guys on the Angels. That I don't know if he's going to be in the lineup though. I can't even remember his name, but they called up some prospect that's really good. So keep an eye out for that. If I don't want to take his pick either though. So let's see.
What a gentleman.
No, Scooter Jeanette. I wish that he was in the lineup because he could go off for that 4 home run explosion any day. Maybe I'm woefully underprepared for this home run segment. I apologize, but maybe I'll just go chalk Freddie Freeman. Why not? He's a great power hitter. Schumacher is a good pitcher, but Atlanta's not a bad park.
All right. I like that pick. I do think Atlanta could be interesting today, and Shoemaker is certainly a guy that not showing a ton of value in the majors, at least in terms of being able to strike guys out. That's one area that he definitely struggles with. I'm going to go. I think I have to go to Houston just because of my ownership there. I'm trying to think which one. I think, I got to take the best hitter overall, the guy that I think is the best hitter. Alex Bregman will be my pick today, going against Madison Bumgarner. All right, there we go. Bregman's in. And we'll update you guys if the news god, our boy El Negro Loco, of course, does the live vlogs for MLB and NBA, which you can check out at Awesemo.com. And Terry T. McBee doing a lot of our MLB content every single day as well. These guys have been, quite frankly, 2 of the best home run pickers thus far in our limited sample size this year. So we'll make sure to give you guys the good picks as opposed to just mine. There we go. News god on Jose Altuve. So we're on the same little page here with Astros. All right. All right, let's talk some stacks here. I'm updating the top stacks tool. Looks like I have the most recent one in here. So the top stack of the day, no surprise, going to be Colorado in terms of their chance to be a top stack. Though, Alex, you do have the top stacks tool, and one of the key points of it, which, again, you can get yourself at awesemo.com/join. No promo codes for it now, so you should have taken advantage of that previous one. But keep your eyes peeled. We always do have some deals coming either on these shows or at the @Awesemo_com YouTube or Twitter handle, rather. Of course, the YouTube channel you're already on. Colorado, though, Alex, they do look a little bit overowned relative to their chance of being a top stack, but they're going against Kevin Gausman, who certainly struggles with power. I talked about earlier that I do think that there is some strikeout ability for him. I think he's certainly capable of striking these Colorado Rockies out, who don't have a ton of guys who are great in that category. But still, it's in Coors. It's a 6.7 point implied run total. As you mentioned, there's really no reason to go to Gausman. But these hitters, people are going to go too heavy. So how do you feel about the stack overall? And is there anything you can do to get different here? Like maybe not go into the 5-man, trying to get a 3-man, or do you not feel the need to get different at all?
Well, I feel like the Rockies are being correctly identified by the player base as the best stack. It's not any shocker because they have a 6.6 team total today. You can find that projection on the lineup builder. I go by the means, not the median, so it's a little different. That's a whole run higher than the next highest of the Angels. So I think pretty much any projection system, if you just go for the best lineups, is going to land you heavily on the Rockies. So it's going to be hard to get an advantage going to the Rockies tonight, I feel like. That doesn't mean I won't have them, but I think there's some other good spots. Like I like going to the other side of the game with San Francisco. They are facing German Marquez, which is a big negative, but if they get it going early in the game, they'll only be facing him for a couple innings. So then you have really great conditions versus probably the worst of the bullpen arms. So that's definitely a way I'm looking tonight.
Interesting. And I guess to circle back on Colorado real fast, is there any sort of overarching tip you have about, trying to get to these 5-man stacks of a chalky team and getting different? Like, would you want to maybe try to force in more Daniel Murphy or more Sam Hilliard? Hilliard actually does have a pretty good projection on him, and the ownership isn't too high. It looks like under 5% projected ownership for him hitting down in the 7-hole. But is there anything, I guess, you would recommend overall, even not specific to these Rockies, but just in general, where you have these stacks that are going to be, 15 to 25% owned overall? Is there any way to get different with them if you still really you can't see a way that's not the top stack on the day?
There are some tricks I have that I like to do, which one of them, this was really relevant a few slates ago, and I neglected to mention it, but if there's a team that has multiple players with the same position, and you can only get one of them in your lineup, that creates an additional leverage spot, because you're going to have one or the other in the stack. So that is something to keep an eye out for, to make a lineup that's more unique, because that's going to really drive down the ownership of one of those players, which is the worst of the two. Unfortunately, I'm not well organized to put this into action right now for you guys, but
I would think going Hilliard over Dahl seems like the obvious one to me, where you're not only saving $900, but you're also saving about 15% in ownership. So that seems like a move, but that does make sense that you just want to find one pivot point. And I think that is one. And again, Daniel Murphy projected for under 10%, Hilliard projected for under 5%, Tony Walters, never wrong to go with a catcher in a 5-man stack. He's projected for 2% ownership, though Tony Walters does mostly stink. So keep that in mind too. But yeah, I think that does make sense. I just wanted to ask you that for more of a game theory perspective, because it's one that people are probably going to have to face a lot in this MLB season, especially if we keep losing teams. That's going to result in even more hitting chalk. We only have 6 teams playing games at some point. Let's keep going through some of these stacks. And the next one on Alex's hit list for the top stacks tool, which you can get yourself at awesemo.com/join if you want to pare down this process for yourself. The Angels going against Justin Dunn. Alex, you mentioned the prospect coming up there earlier, but this team, even if you keep this lineup as it is right now, guys like Rendon being in the mix compared to some of the flotsam they had last year, he's been looking good, obviously, as you would hope with the money they paid him. Mike Trout back in there after his brief little paternity leave. He's looking pretty solid. Ohtani, I guess we don't know if he's in yet. No Angels lineup yet, but Ohtani, a bit of a risk maybe not to play, but overall the Angels look good. Where are you rating with the Angels today going against Justin Dunn, a guy who has not shown much in his limited sample size in the majors?
I think that they're probably the second best stack. Well, I shouldn't even say probably. I mean, I think they're obviously the second best stack. They have really good prices aside from Mike Trout and Rendon. So I think they're going to be super popular. And for that reason, it's if you want to take them, I think it's fine. You just got to come up with some other play that is going to differentiate your lineup. And there are some contrarian stacks on tonight's slate that I think serve that purpose pretty well.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. And there is going to be some chalky ownership. Mike Trout, you always know, is going to find his ownership. Ohtani also going to be pretty highly owned. Rendon, weirdly, not projected for much in the way of ownership. So maybe one way to pay up there to get contrarian, though. I think 6,200 for Mike Trout. Is there a price point for you, Alex, where Mike Trout just doesn't occur for you much? Because 6,200 feels like it could be close to that level.
I mean, we gotta factor in the narratives too, because he just had that new baby narrative. That means I'd pay an extra 1K based on my model. So I'd pay at least 8K for Mike Trout tonight.
Sure. He's very virile, as we know, his ability to have a child. That's really what matters the most. And I think the baby narrative obviously this is not a real data point, but I feel like the baby narrative is if you have a guy whose wife is very in control and on top, and she'll take the ownership of things because she knows her professional athlete husband is gonna, he's got to focus on their stuff. Then those guys don't get affected. But I was last year, Jose Ramirez, I think, where his wife is making him chip in a little more. he had a terrible 3-month window. He was up till 3 a.m. changing baby diapers and feeding them. So that's what to keep in mind here. Do you think Mike Trout has the upper hand in his relationship or not? I think that should be a DFS data point.
That's a good point. Yeah, I mean, we got to look at the fact that this is a road game. So he's in Seattle. That means that he probably didn't bring the baby with him. So I think he'll be fine, as long as we got to check the travel schedules, though, because I don't know when he got in. Maybe it was this afternoon, in which case like he could be really tired.
That's true. He could be having some dudes night out time too, maybe getting a little too loose out there. You never know how it is on the road, but something to consider for a $6,200 Mike Trout today on DraftKings. And of course, make sure you're playing on SuperDraft today. Of course, they've had some overlay in a lot of their MLB tournaments as well as NBA. Some of the costs of doing business as a new site, but that's all benefit for you. So if you get your lineups in early for MLB today, or even if you just have a little time right now, you have about 30 minutes left until lock. Take advantage of SuperDraft's deals and use that promo code Awesemo10. It's AWESEMO10, and that'll get you $10 free with your deposit of $10. And if you deposit over $100, you get yourself $20 free, and that money comes available to you right away. So you can play it in a tournament pretty much the second you deposit. So you can do that at superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft from the App Store. And again, really play it for yourself as much as us. They're a sponsor. We want you guys to sign up there, but overlay is the best thing you do for yourself as a DFS player. And that is one place that will always have some for you at superdraft.io or SuperDraft on the App Store. Jeremiah in the YouTube chat saying that Ohtani's listed as a pitcher on FanDuel, so don't think he will accrue points tonight if he does start. I didn't see that. I'm not playing on FanDuel for MLB tonight, but I would hope they fix that.
That's right, because you can't roster him in the outfield on FanDuel tonight. So that does make the Angels stack intriguing if he's not in the player pool, because that's just one less batter, and I don't know exactly how that'll affect it, but it makes it so if you stack up the Angels on FanDuel, it'll be a little bit harder to make a unique lineup.
Interesting. Yeah, so keep that in mind if you're playing on FanDuel tonight. A little bit of a weird quirk in a season, or rather a couple weeks here of sports, just chock full of weird quirks. That's another one tonight on FanDuel. Alex, is there a stack tonight that you feel is pretty sneaky? Because it does feel like for the most part, the stacks are appropriately owned. Perhaps besides San Francisco, who you hit on, is that the one that you would key in on and trying to get some leverage? Because it does seem their chance of being a top stack tonight just under 10%, and the ownership not quite there. So is that the one that you feel is the most under the radar? Maybe Atlanta too.
I like Atlanta a lot. I think that let's see, they're facing Toronto, who doesn't have the greatest collection of arms. And they got a lot of power. So I think that they really fit the bill as far as contrarian stacks. And San Francisco, I mentioned, I think that once they get past Marquez, if they do, then they'll be in a really good spot. And then maybe stacking against one of these good pitchers in Miller Park with the White Sox versus Brewers. I think that could be one that another situation where if they get past that first pitcher, that they might be in an advantageous position. Interesting. Yeah, I think that does make sense. And the top stacks tool, again, will be your guiding tool, your compass for building lineups. So make sure you're checking that regularly. We talked about them a little bit, Alex, but I want to hear your thoughts, I guess, a little more fully about Houston. They have an implied total today of 4.9 runs. Going into Arizona, who does have the roof closed, so you're not getting that desert heat boost that maybe some people would like to see. But Houston, I just look at their numbers on the year, and they've really not been good, hitting for only a 103 ISO. You can make your jokes about trash can banging and all of that, but it does seem to me like they're just due for better days, especially for guys like Altuve, Bregman, the guys who've really murdered lefties over the last few years. These guys, to me, seem like they should have some better moments. Also know Michael Brantley in the lineup tonight, I think makes it, a little bit more obvious here to stack. But where do you rate with Houston, Alex? Because it does seem relative to the top stacks tool. They do have the third best chance of being a top stack, but mostly appropriately owned, it seems. Yeah, I mean, I think that they're solid. As you mentioned, Bumgarner isn't having a great season so far. Although he's limited some damage, it sounds like he's been getting more lucky than pitching well. So that's definitely a guy I want to target. And Houston, it's hard to really know how the pitch tipping will impact their stats going forward. But I mean, there's some really smart guys handicapping these games. So that's definitely the main data point I'm going to look at is what are people taking the money on? And they have Houston at 5.4 runs. That is tied for third on tonight's slate. So they're definitely a high percentage play. Yeah, I feel like, they could end up kind of leaving me
hanging by the end of the night, but I feel like at least a 3-man stack of Houston, I think has pretty good potential. And that's just one that I've been on all day. So want to try to close the loop there as best we can. Here's a team that I'm curious your thoughts about because they're coming off of a very unique situation and a year full of them. Miami really was playing well before coronavirus took a week of their season off, though. We'll see if they end up having to make those games up or how that's going to work. But they have a few guys here, and John Means has been really not great to start the year. You could argue going back to last year, even though he was an all-star, he really wasn't that great on a numbers basis, only a 19% K rate, giving up a good amount of power, 185 ISO overall. This year, though, to start, 7.5 xFIP, a lower strikeout rate, giving up a lot of hard contact. And Miami, for whatever flaws there are in Miami, both in terms of healthcare and also just their own ability to play baseball, they made some changes here, like guys like Corey Dickerson, Jesus Aguilar, Brian Anderson, who was really good previous years. But these guys are new additions who do have some pop. Going against Means in Baltimore, I'm a little intrigued by Miami, and it seems like the ownership isn't there in a meaningful way. Do you see any value going to Miami tonight, or would it be a stay away for you?
Yeah, like it as a contrarian stack, I think that's a good call. I mean, John Means is definitely not someone we're afraid to target. So I think that is a green light. They have some good power bats, as you mentioned. And they're also not really cheap. They're pretty fairly priced. So I think that the ownership will be low on them because they're not really exceptional in any factor. And so I like them as a contrarian stack.
Yeah, and Miami, again, has shown some upside this year, though. Remains to be seen how long that will continue here for them, as well as the season. How long? That's a big question for them, too. But Miami, I think, jumps out as being interesting. And I guess it is the same park. And Pablo Lopez, we have not seen pitch this year. In the past, he's been a guy who does keep the ball down pretty well. Gives up a 175 ISO going back to the beginning of last season, but just a 31% fly ball rate. Did you land on any Baltimore for yourself today going against Pablo in a park that should be very conducive to hitting? And the weather, not bad there. I mean, it's 80 degrees, it seems, so not the hottest, but also definitely not cold like some of these other parks.
Yeah, I think Baltimore seems like maybe a stack that a lower percentage play because Pablo Lopez isn't horrible, and they got Chris Davis batting 6. But I think they're worth taking some shots on because as you mentioned, the weather conditions are good. They really don't have a great talent as far as their team, but I don't like that they're playing at home either because if they're up in the game, that's one less inning. But I think that they're going to be pretty unpopular too because I have them at about 3% ownership and a 4% chance to be in the top stack. So that's a differential that is positive.
Yeah, and it's worth noting too, no Rio Ruiz for those Orioles today after he's been one of their better power hitters. He's out of the lineup, so keep that in mind in case for some reason you're not checking your lineups while building teams. Seems like an important part of the process, but just in case, Rio Ruiz is not in there, and Chris Davis is in there, so also be careful of him. That's the way to approach that. Anybody, Alex, who you're getting as a fade stack wise thus far, because we're getting a little bit close to the wire here, about 20 minutes left to lock. And it does seem, there's a lot of merits to these teams, maybe besides Kansas City, even Texas, I think you can make an argument for based on Luzardo's ownership, though I will probably not have much Texas myself. But is there anybody you're just not getting at all in stacks or anybody who you're deliberately cutting out?
This is the dangerous one because taking a stance against the team is much harder than recommending every team. But I think I gotta mention that Washington. I think let's see, Washington is just priced way too low tonight on both FanDuel and DraftKings. So I think that the matchup for Steven Matz isn't anything really to be scared of, and they got a good team totals, so those factors are good. It's just the ownership is going to be very high, so I'd much rather just try to be a little bit more contrarian.
Yeah, Washington certainly comes up a little bit. Josh Harrison, a guy people in the chat were talking about at the beginning of the show, coming off of, I guess, a COVID roster edition. He's certainly somebody who's going to pop up, I think, for an optimizer today at minimum price or just about minimum price on DraftKings and also comparably cheap on FanDuel. And yeah, I agree. Washington definitely seems like the cheap stack of the day to go to. Like Yan Gomes, I like at his price point, but If he's going to be 10% owned, I probably should like Yan Gomes less. It seems like the only guy. Actually, there's going to be a lot of ownership for Howie Kendrick today, which amuses me as somebody who's enjoyed Howie Kendrick quite a bit over the years. Now he's an everyday player, and he's not been quite looking as good in that role. But yeah, high ownership for the top three for Washington in particular. And it does seem like the 5-man stack also going to have a good swath of ownership there. So even though Steven Matt's a guy to target against, it does seem Washington will be very appropriately owned, if not too owned. Let's see. Any questions in the YouTube chat? I'm checking this out now. Miami and Baltimore starting at 8:15, so that is officially a thing going down. No new lineups out yet, so we still are missing the official Miami lineup, still missing the Angels lineup. Everything else is in so far. Alex, anything interesting you're noticing in your crunches as we go through here? Because this is sort of your prime time here to have your most accurate findings about what you're building. So anything jumping out with you?
For sure, yeah. Let me pull up my crunches here. I noticed on FanDuel, Colorado is by far and away the most popular team. So that would lead me to maybe take a stance on some other teams that they might be pulling away ownership from. Those would be teams like San Francisco, like LA on FanDuel. I don't think is going to be quite as popular as on DraftKings. So that's definitely jumping out on my FanDuel crunch. On DraftKings, I notice I'm getting a ton of Nationals in my crunch. And that is probably going to make me lean the other way, where I just think they're going to be too popular because people are too on them. And I'm happy enough to just go to some more expensive teams.
That makes sense. And also people asking about Dong calls. We did, in fact, give our Dong calls a little early today. I took Alex Bregman, Josh took nobody. Josh is a coward. He's afraid. His name is first on the spreadsheet. We don't have a single home run pick in the sheet for him. But Alex took Freddie Freeman, and El Negro Loco took Jose Altuve. If anybody else has them, actually, I'll check the Slack to see if anybody else tagged me. Emac took Matt Adams, his fat friend Matt Adams. He says Matt Adams, aka the fat one. So that is not me fat shaming. I'm no longer legally allowed to do that. So Matt Adams.
Man, that was a callback.
Callback still too fresh in my mind now. Those are our home run picks though. So there you have them. Do you guys like Angels and Dodgers? Tori Coleman is asking. I think we've discussed the Angels at some length, but we have not talked about the Dodgers. And to be clear, we do like the Angels, but it does seem like they'll have some ownership. Maybe, as Alex mentioned a few minutes ago, a little more logical to go on FanDuel, where that stack's going to line up a bit less naturally because of Shohei Ohtani not being available as a hitter. But the Dodgers, Alex, do you see any value in going to them today, knowing that on a given night they can go off? And Lamet is a very good pitcher, but he has had some struggles with power. Does give up a 173 ISO overall, and the home run rate a little bit above league average going back to last year. So, any value for you in a Dodgers stack?
Absolutely, I have no problem going to the Dodgers here because I feel like once they get past Lamet, like assuming that they're having a good day, then it's very easy to see them going off against the San Diego bullpen that might not be running out their best guys. So I'm expecting the bullpen to be worse on average than the starting pitcher. That's a good factor. The Dodgers are just a really talented team. So I think people are going to be scared away about Lamet, and that could drive the ownership down.
And not a great run total in the Dodgers, and not much ownership for any of these guys. It does seem like Jock will have some ownership as the leadoff guy at a pretty reasonable price, and Cody Bellinger, people never afraid of going there as a one-off. But everybody else in this lineup does look pretty much untouched. So Max Muncy goes off and does get to Lamet or Justin Turner even. There are some ways here that these guys can have an outlier day. And also some cheap guys too. You do have Matt Beattie there in the 6 hole, should be pretty cheap. Edwin Rios, not the most expensive either. And Kike Hernandez, always a bit of a forgotten man, but as we saw earlier in the year, can spike that upside and win you a tournament. Let's see, anything else in the YouTube chat? Brewers stack does sound appealing, says Fuzzy Dunlop. And we talked about him up top here. The Brewers on the year looking bad. But Alex, one last time for the folks just starting to filter in or people trying to get their last lineups in. Milwaukee for you, where do they rate as a team who, again, has been really terrible to start the year, but going against Giolito, maybe that can be a get well spot with what he's shown this year, not looking too great.
I'm not excited about the matchup versus Giolito by any means, but I like the fact that they're playing in Miller Park. The weather, though, is a little bit cooler than you would like for stacking up the team. So All in all, I think the Brewers are fine to have in a few lineups, but they're not going to be a core part of my strategy tonight.
And another team, okay, I know we just talked about them, but we're getting a lot of questions about the Orioles, people asking if they're a good second stack, people asking about them on FanDuel. So one more time, Alex, your thoughts on the Orioles and against Pablo Lopez, a mediocre pitcher who does keep the ball down fairly well. But I'm telling you, I'm shocked by the amount of Orioles questions we've gotten in the last 10 minutes. And I did see them pop in my optimizer a little. So I'm wondering if maybe you think the Orioles might be a little higher owned than we currently have them projected for.
Yeah, it's not like an exciting team. So the fact that we're getting so many questions about them, like, is a little bit of a red flag, I would say.
Yeah.
So maybe if everyone is thinking they're going to be sneaky, then they won't be so sneaky, right?
That's basically what I think whenever. I mean, no offense to the YouTube chat. It's just more, of a group think thing where you see a lot of people talking about something. It does tend to mean that maybe that is generally representative of the overall population. That's just me, anecdotally from hosting these shows for a couple of years now. I think that Baltimore looks okay, but I do have some fears that people may be going to them as their value stack or a value stack that they perceive to have some upside. And I mean, I really they have very few guys who have power that you want to see, and going against Pablo Lopez, a guy who just doesn't give up a ton of power. I definitely wouldn't want a 5-man Baltimore stack is what I would say. And if you get a 3-man, sure, but not my move. What's the holdup on the Angels official list? I think it might be that prospect that Terry had mentioned in his column that Alex also mentioned. Marlins lineup just comes through though, so let's see how that looks. Logan Forsythe makes the lineup. Interesting. Let's see if there's any important changes for Miami here as I put it in for you guys. Miami. So we got VR still in, I think. Oops, put that in the wrong spot. If VR, Birdie. So the top of the order is still mostly there. No Sean Rodriguez seems to be the main thing. Lewis Brinson did make it in. And then Monty Harrison is in the bottom of the order there instead of Magneuris Sierra. I always screw up his name. Magneuris Sierra. So that is one thing to keep in mind there. A little bit of changes there for Miami. If you did put them into your lineup, just make sure to get the right version of them in there now. All right. Check for any other questions here. Still no Angels lineup, so don't worry if you haven't seen them yet. They have not. Jeremiah Johnson asking about the Blue Jays. Blue Jays, another team, Alex, who've been terrible to start the year, though people may still remember some fond memories of them alternating killing them and occasionally winning people tournaments last year. So do you have any Blue Jays for yourself?
Yeah, I think they're kind of an up-and-coming team. The prices look fine, but not great. The matchup definitely is negative versus Max Fried, so I think the weather is a positive, though. So all in all, it's kind of like all these factors seem to be balancing out. So they're definitely a team I'm having the mix today.
Getting a question in the YouTube chat, and this is a team that we talked about up top, but have not hit on the stacks portion of the show in our back half here. So people may be wondering, Patrick Fitzgerald, are the White Sox a good stack play tonight? Would that be? No, I think he's right. Is they a good stack play today? Would be incorrect because we're talking about the play. So is the White Sox a good stack tonight, Alex, or are the White Sox a bad one because they're going against Woodruff, who's a chalk pitcher? But if Woodruff does get beaten up, we talked about earlier, the weather out there is cold, but these White Sox, are they landing for you?
I think I think the motivation is you want to take a team that has a lot of talent versus a pitcher that may be kind of chalky. So I kind of like that leverage play. I don't know if Woodruff will be like he'll probably be one of the most popular plays tonight, but it does seem to be spread out decently between a lot of different guys. But I think that is pretty solid.
Yeah, so there's the answer right from the top DFS player in the world. So that's all you need in your lives. And also Lewis Brinson is in. Okay. So Lewis Brinson still marked as on the IL on DraftKings, but he is in fact in tonight's lineup, just in case you are running into that like I am right now. Is DraftKings missing Marlins batters? Can't find VR. I don't think they're missing VR. I think they are missing Logan Forsythe, but I'm not sure about that actually. Anyway, whatever. Look, there's some other questions here. Check the premium Slack too, and make sure you do get that Awesemo Plus membership so you can see, get all of your premium access. It includes questions too. We check that first and foremost. SJM, thanks SJM. Let's see. Thoughts on Jesus Luzardo? We talked about him up top, but Pedrito PR doing his lineups wants one more little swath of reassurance, Alex. So Jesus Luzardo, what's your take on him one more time?
I think he's a good strikeout pitcher that probably won't go deep, but the price kind of accounts for that. So it's a guy we're definitely going to be taking some shots on, like especially if he fits just being a cheap pitcher to fit in an expensive stack.
We are also getting a question from our guy Makad about the Paul Blackburn of the night, which of course a historical award that goes to the worst pitcher on a slate who could potentially find his way into a tournament winning lineup. For me, that's Kevin Gausman. I just think I do have more than a field. I have about 5% Gausman just because why not? You only live once. That's not the best DFS reason why, but I see a way where he can get strikeouts. I think going against Colorado, going against a popular Colorado stack in Colorado is a move that I deploy usually if I have a good amount of Colorado stacks. So Gausman would be the pick for me, Alex. But do you have another one who would fit this criteria? I feel like there isn't really anybody that cheap. So Javier or Christian Javier for Houston might be the only guy who fits.
Yeah, I think Javier would be my cheap pitcher of the night because I'm not willing to go down to the very bottom of the barrel guys.
Yeah, I think that's fair. And Javier, certainly a pitcher who is cheap and has some actual ability, and that might not make him a full Blackburn candidate, but still somebody that could potentially be a cheap guy who helps you out today. Checking the YouTube chat again. Heaney or Javier Christian, this person asked. So they're just trying to throw me for a loop by saying it backwards. Alex, if you had to choose between spending up for Heaney or taking the discount for Christian Javier, which of these two guys would you want to go to? Like, do you feel like the price discount? It's hard to compare two guys at different price points, but Alex, if you had to choose for Edmund in the YouTube chat, which way would you want to lean there for Heaney or Christian Javier?
I think there's an innate advantage just spending more of your salary on bats. So I'd probably go to Javier because he's a cheaper guy, but either one, totally fine. Not really a decision where there's a wrong answer.
Okay, that makes sense. Going back to the Slack, checking out everything here. Castellanos is raking. Okay, that's good to know. I'm glad for Castellanos. All right, nothing else in the Slack. Back to YouTube. We're taking your last questions here. About 7 minutes left to lock. Matthew Rappaport, one of our very few YouTube verified people in the chat, so his name always pops out to me, asking about Steven Matz. Is he going to be low owned and sneaky? I guess there's a question for you, Alex. And I guess you've talked about this before with hitters, not as much value taking a hitter going against a somewhat owned stack. But do you feel like there's any value going to Steven Matz, or would you rather take a guy like Christian Javier, who's going to be cheaper and it doesn't really matter about the correlation going against the highly owned stack?
I think Matz will be low owned, but I don't know if he's sneaky because by pretty much every metric, you'd think that he's not really going to stand out. The matchup isn't great. And I think if you're just trying to get a guy that's going to have a different lineup construction in the field, like I can see advantage in that, but it's not like I'd be excited about having him.
Okay. Yeah, I think that makes sense. And yeah, Matt's really not a lot of reason to go to him besides trying to maybe, stick it to the people who are playing Washington, and Washington will be played. So I guess that's one reason there. But Alex has talked before on here about how there isn't as much value as there is relative to, say, stacking against the pitcher who's going to be owned. Not quite as much value going with a pitcher against the stack. So just keep that in mind when you're building your lineups. Zientech Outdoors asking about, here's one we haven't talked about at all. Jack McNoskey asking about the Cubs stack. The Cubs, Alex, you talked about earlier, maybe not the best hitting conditions there, which is why you do like Kyle Hendricks on the other side going against Kansas City. But do you have any interest in the Cubs themselves going against Brady Singer, who's been mostly, it seems like, replacement level in his limited MLB starts so far?
Yeah, I think the Cubs are a talented team. The conditions are pretty abysmal for bats, so for that reason, I would probably look elsewhere personally. But if you want to bank on talent, it's not hard to imagine them go now.
Yep, I think that seems fair. And certainly a Cubs team who's pretty loaded in terms of their lineup, so never an issue there. Kind of like the Dodgers we talked about earlier. Never going to be an issue going to one of those guys. Let's see. Top 3 pitchers in order, either value or high price. That is way too ambitious of a question. I think it seems, Alex, like, would we still agree that the top 3 pitchers are going to be Woodruff? Maybe we can nickel and dime Heaney, but Woodruff, Luzardo, and then where are you with a third? Or is that your 3?
Hendricks is my number one, and then there's a bunch of guys that are kind of like grading out as pretty equal to me. So that would be Luzardo, Heaney. We got Woodruff. I mean, there's a lot of good pitchers going today. So that's kind of where I am. I'm having a lot of exposure to all these guys, with the exception of Kyle Hendricks, who I think will be my highest owned by a decent margin.
All right. Any other good questions here? Full Cub stack too much? I mean, I feel like we sort of covered that one. It's fine to go there, but it doesn't look like the best play on paper. Conditions there should theoretically favor the pitching. Brian Anderson, a good one-off from the Miami lineup. I'm intrigued. Look, I talked about my Miami stack. I'm intrigued by Brian Anderson as being a key part of that stack. I think as a one-off, I don't have an issue with it, but I think Aguilar, Dickerson, and Cervelli too is one that I wouldn't sleep on today. I feel like the numbers aren't going to jump off the page there, but he's still a guy who has some power in him, and maybe a pivot to some other higher owned catcher plays out there. But we'll see. Let's see, anything else good here? So you got some premium Slack questions potentially. Javier or Hendricks pitching for FanDuel cash. Do you have a lean for FanDuel cash between Christian Javier and Kyle Hendricks? I assume it's going to be Hendricks for you.
Yeah, Hendricks I have is a better play, especially on FanDuel, because he just has that potential to go deep in the game, which is more valuable on FanDuel, where you get points for that quality start. So that's definitely going to be my pitcher of the night.
All right. Checking for anything else. Any good last questions? Get them in now. You got about 3 minutes left to lock. Probably less by the time you guys hear this. Let's see. Oh boy, catcher questions. Steven asking, did you get all your Butlers swapped out? Did you handle that appropriately, Alex, while doing also MLB lineups?
Yeah, I got Butler out. I didn't end up getting as much Olenek as I'd like, because it seems like he's just been on fire. So I feel bad about that fade, but how about you? How did you end up faring with that?
I had Butler mostly out before the show because I saw that right before we came on. I didn't have a ton of exposure to him and didn't play a lot of night slate, so I'm okay. But I made sure to cram in some Goran Dragic for myself because that's the one that I usually go to whenever Butler's out. I feel like it's usually the he or Kendrick Nunn show, and Nunn seems like he's fallen out of favor. But we'll see. I have no idea what's going on in the game, so it could be completely wrong already and look like an asshole, so that's good. And guys, hit that like button too. Obviously, we've been here with you guys for an hour, and it always helps us out a bunch. And I'm not going to extort you for likes because there's nothing else to extort. We're giving you all the information we have in our hearts. But hit that like button because it helps us out a bunch here today. Who's a go-to catcher for today? 3,500 or less? As Jay Kearney is asking. Alex, is there anybody who rates for you as being worthwhile as a catcher at 3,500 or less? I think for me, it would be Jan Gomes, who I find intriguing and I have a good amount of. But anybody at catcher who's in the cheapy spot for you?
Let me see who's in my lineups because I just finished uploading them. But I think Austin Nola is a guy that he seems to have a lot of potential in the catcher spot because he does have decent hitting stats.
Yep. Okay. So that seems like a very reasonable answer from the boss man. And also people in the chat again talking about the Angels prospect Joe Adele. So keep your eyes peeled for that one because that might be why the Angels lineup has still been delayed. Again, the only lineup that we don't have right now is that Angels lineup. And about seconds left before lock. So if you haven't finished your lineup, start panicking now or take a deep breath and keep going. People asking about Ramos against the Nats. Wilson Ramos, is he a cheap catcher? I mean, I guess I could see that. I don't love going against Corbin. I don't expect the best results there. Ramos is going to be chalky as hell, so that would scare me away of Ramos. But Alex, for you with Wilson Ramos, any thoughts?
I mean, he's one of the better batting catchers, so that definitely makes sense to me.
Yeah, I think I would be inclined to get a little bit lower owned for my cheap catcher option. Just these guys fail a lot, and Ramos is projected for about 20% ownership. So hopefully tread lightly, or hopefully he goes off for you guys for the 20% of the field for all of you.
One thing I'll mention is we got SuperDraft locking in 5 minutes. They go with the staggered start time. So looks like they're 315 out of 383. So I'm about to enter some lineups in there. Put some last minute ones in them. Looks like Rockies are probably the top stack. Baltimore on SuperDraft has a really nice multiplier though, so that they're looking pretty good to me.
Yeah, make sure to take advantage of SuperDraft's promo code as well. Use that one Awesemo10, AWESEMO10, because that'll get you $10 for your deposit of $10 and $20 if you deposit more than $100. And that money comes to you in super cash right away when you deposit, so you can play it in tournaments immediately. So make sure you're doing that at SuperDraft. And one last plug here, make sure you're playing the NHL with our boy Jake Hari, as well as our other assorted crew who chime in there on the strategy show. But the NHL product, really one of our underrated ones, I would say, thanks in no small part to Jake and Alex doing a great job with the data, but really watch the shows, play NHL, use the promo code NHL is back at awesemo.com/join. That is our promo code for the return of the NHL, and it is a very valuable one for you because it'll give you half off your first month of our NHL package at awesemo.com/join. So use that promo code NHL is back. A lot of similar principles, as Alex mentioned earlier in the show, to playing baseball. Just stacking is an important part. And again, Jake will walk you through it on all these shows here. So subscribe, hit the notification bell, watch out for NHL content because that is back as well. And also, one thing I totally forgot to plug up top, sorry, Jordan, was the free lineup builder. We have our tools, free premium content, always some free content going on at Awesemo. And today it's lineup builder. So if you're playing around for some of the late slates, check out the lineup builder at awesemo.com. It's free today for the MLB, NHL, and NBA. It's less of a fantasy cruncher, which of course you can get access to from us. It's more of a single lineup build type of approach there, but it's free today. So play around with it, check it out, and familiarize yourself with all that we have at awesemo.com. Speaking of, Alex, any plugs here before we call it quits?
Yeah, just thanks everyone for watching tonight. I actually see another advantage that I want to mention before we log off here is that block happened before the Angels got their lineup out. So there is a decent chance that the Angels stack will go underowned. I played them, and I'm just going to hand swap guys if it comes down to the guys being out of the lineup. So that's something I'm looking out for later in the night. So make sure to stay tuned to the projections as I update them. Thanks again, everyone, for supporting the site. And I'm really excited to have all these sports back. It feels like it's back to normal. And thanks to SuperDraft. They do a lot to help us out as players. Where creating a new game type and giving out these special promos and having a lot of overlays. You don't pay as much playing in SuperDraft, so definitely support them.
Yeah, please go support SuperDraft. Do it for yourself. Again, with that promo code Awesemo10. Gets you $10 free with your deposit of $10, and you can get $20 free if you deposit more than $100 on superdraft.io or by downloading SuperDraft in the App Store. So do that and subscribe. We got a ton of shows coming on. As Alex mentioned, there is so much news every single day. So do yourself a favor, pay attention, follow our handles, check, honestly, be a part of the premium Slack because El Negro Loco is doing a great job tagging whenever there's any important news out there. But hey, enjoy. All the sports are back, and stay safe out there if you're anywhere that's got some weather issues or other assorted issues, because it's a weird day on those fronts. But we appreciate you guys watching. Hit the like button before you go, and we'll see you guys again soon. Good luck.